You're listening to Biotech Hangout, a live and unedited weekly discussion of all the newest and best in our industry with a group of biotech leaders and experts. I'm Yaron Werber with my co-host today, John Morganori, who's going to join in a minute, Sam Faselli and Matt Glein. For more information about our host and guest speaker or to listen to the most recent episode, please go to biotechhangout.com. So we have literally an action-packed agenda, and I think we're going to be remiss if we're not going to start off by talking about the most important news in the world, in the opinion of N of One, myself, when that's the upcoming um, third and fourth place for the men's World Cup soccer final tomorrow, and then of course the World Cup soccer final on Sunday. And we have with us today. We're very lucky to have Sam, who is very close to both England and France. And so, Sam, what's your prediction first of all for that game? And I don't know if you want to share with us who you're actually rooting for.
Yeah, well, remember, Yaron, I'm kind of perfectly hedged here because I love both countries very much and I live in both countries. So I can't lose. However, I think if England play the same way they played with in the Argentina game, then I don't think they have much of a chance in surviving this particular one tomorrow night. But it could be close because France didn't do that well against Spain either. I mean, it was a pretty abysmal performance with Spain being really solid and tight. So very hard to call. I don't know. I mean, you probably. I don't know. I really can't tell. And to be honest with you, a whole bunch of people are saying, "What's the point? Who cares?" Right?
Well, I gotta be honest. So that's my some of my family members, my daughter, and was asking me, "What's the point of the game?" And I was like, "Well, you clearly don't live in the UK or France. I mean, this is still a very important game." Um, okay, Matt, what do you think? I don't know if you have a view, UK or France.
We have a close family friend who's Senegalese and rooted in order for Senegal and then France and then England. And so I've asked her who to bet against on the basis that maybe I can make some money that way. I don't have an axe in the England versus France game. My son, who's 4, has decided he's for Argentina. I'm not sure why, but I guess I'll support his judgments
Yeah, he's a very
for the
smart. He's
game
a
on
very
Sunday.
s- he's going to be an amazing biotech investor if he's
Uh,
supporting Argentina. I
I
like
think
that.
he's, as with many biotech investors, has alighted on the right answer at random.
um, John, what do you think? Who's
I,
your
I
favorite?
for the 3 versus 4, I think it's going to be France. I think they've just got. I think they've got a stronger team. Although I'm sure England wants to do it more than France, and I think Argentina is going to take it. 3-2 on
Wow.
Sunday. That's my prediction.
Gosh,
Not
I
not
love the accuracy there. Well done, John. This is why you're a successful CEO and we're still here judging biotech companies.
Sam, the word you're
and
looking for is precision, not accuracy, precision.
Precision. Yeah, sorry, because accuracy is only post the event, right?
and
Exactly.
so 3-2, and is it going to overtime or not going to
Oh yeah,
overtime?
overtime for sure. Oh yeah. Totally,
All right,
totally. Oh
overtime
yeah.
3-2.
Yeah.
Sam, what do you think for the final?
Oh, I do fancy Argentina, but then my close colleague Javier is from Spain, so I'm gonna have, and we have a Spanish flag hanging off his back of his chair next to me. So I have to bear that in mind if I want my life to be worth living for the next year.
The and Matt, who are you picking for the final?
Well, like I said, I think I've got to follow my son's judgment. So I'm for Argentina and have no idea of the score.
Yeah. So I'm okay. I'm taking France. They've looked way too good. I don't know if you saw the statistics. I mean, we probably all watched the games. For the last 20 minutes, 21 minutes of the Argentina against the UK game, literally there were 8 shots on goal from Argentina. They controlled 93% of the possession. They completed like 180 passes versus 7 for England. I mean, it's mind-boggling
Mm.
um, how well they did. I think it's a function of the strategy for the UK.
Yeah. Jeroen, can you bet on the games through Kalshi as well? Because that's the topic we're
I,
going to talk
I
about. Probably.
I'm
I'm
bad
sure you
enough.
can.
Well, I'm bad enough doing my day job, and so I don't bet on anything.
No, not you specifically, but through that, because that's a topic that I think we might touch on later.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm picking Argentina 2-1, and I'm worried about. I'm a little worried about that game. I think Spain looked extremely good.
Yeah.
Okay, well, let's now shift over, and let's now we're going to do macro. We're going to start from the top and kind of dive in. Matt, maybe give us a little bit of a sense, kind of what are you seeing? There's been a lot of volatility in biotech. What kind of questions are you getting from investors? And obviously, you're running a pretty stable, promising company at this point. So the whims of the markets are a little bit less important to you right now. But how does that impact your ability to execute?
Hey, thanks, Sharon. Stability is all relative. I was, I was sitting around last Friday, and you're CEO. You check the market at some point, and you realize your stock's down 4 or 5%. Your first thought is like, shoot, what did I say? And then you realize that, uh, or what did a competitor do or something? Like, what happened that I'm missing? And then you realize that the index is down and everyone's down. You're like, okay, so like this is a Hillary Clinton tweet situation. Like some public official said something about MFN pricing or whatever, and then that's not true. And you're like, okay, it must be the Fed or interest rates, and that's not true. And finally, you throw up your hands and you call an investment bank, and you're like, what's happening? And they say, oh, it's factor driven. So this happened to me on Friday, and I was like, "Well, what does that mean?" And they were like, "It's Jane Street. Blame Jane Street." So I called my friend at Jane Street, and he was like, "It's not us." And I was led to believe that, and this is it's like an interesting lesson about the markets at this stage. Like I think I am probably, or like me and my team, are the people who know the most about the trading dynamics in Roman stock. We talked to all the investors, et cetera. I think it's just impossible to know some days, and I found that like an almost Zen thought. Uh, as I went around my job. So that's been sort of my experience the last week. And investors all have pat explanations like SpaceX is down or whatever. But I think the honest answer is sometimes you just got to throw up your hands.
Yeah, there's so much of it is the momentum in RSI indicators, right? 4% is like nothing these days, obviously. In general, are you seeing anything in the macro environment that you're spending time on, the board is thinking about?
For us, not really. Honestly, for us, I think our view is we've been on a good run and have a lot to do. And I think mostly we're focused on stuff that's specific to us. I'm interested in like whether the market dynamic around companies like ours is going to change at some point, and that could have sort of read through effects to strategy. But there's not much for us to do about it in advance.
Okay, makes sense. Well, we'll come back to you because you're uniquely suited. You're hopefully, knock on wood, should be launching a drug pretty soon, over literally the next 2 months, 2.5 months or so. So I'll come back to you in a minute. Maybe, uh, John, let me go to you next. So we're going to shift over and talk about Lilly. Is continuing its, I'm going to misspell, I'm going to mispronounce it, the Amazonification of pharma, acquiring a variety of different companies. They just literally bought a Beckley for 2.8 billion upfront plus a 1 billion CVR. That's a psychedelic company. And then in general, there's also an Economist article where Lilly is now really reinventing the pharma business. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think look, Lilly is just a fascinating story right now, and we've heard a lot from Dave Ricks on a number of podcasts that he's done, and so forth. And I mean, they're really paving completely new territory as our industry's first $1 trillion business. So it's just fascinating to watch what they're doing. The I thought the Economist article that came out this week was really interesting. It was about Lilly reinventing the pharma business, was I think the title of the article, and it talks about Dave's real conviction to remake Lilly, go from something that's a traditional drug maker to something that's frankly closer to a tech company at some level. And a big part of that is their shift to focusing on prevention of disease as opposed to treatment of disease, which I think is absolutely the right direction to travel for them to make and others to make as well. And they're borrowing a lot of playbook ideas from Silicon Valley, which I think is super interesting as well. I mean, one dimension of this, of course, is they're getting a lot closer to the patient and the consumer, and they've launched a really interesting effort for commercializing their medicines with Lilly Direct, which integrates telehealth and a direct to consumer based strategy, effectively going around the PBMs in that regard. And it just shows, how they're thinking about digital in building their business. So that was the one thing, that one article this week that I thought was super interesting. People should take a close read. But the news this week for Lilly was around the Atai acquisition. Again, a $3.8 billion acquisition, 2.8 billion upfront, and 1 billion linked to a CVR. And Atai is one of these psychedelics companies. They've sort of been, arguably on the fringe of some of what we all think is, biotech, because it's psychedelics. But of course, it's a category that is proving to be pretty important for people with treatment resistant depression, which is a major, 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 major problem. And the lead asset here is a nasally administered treatment, for depression. It's currently in pivotals, so they're buying ahead of the readout, which is a strong and aggressive bet on their part, but arguably, is the right way to do it if they have conviction in the mechanism and the pathway. The other thing about the deal that I sort of find interesting, because I know her personally, is it's one of the first deals under Carol Ho's leadership of Lilly's neuroscience franchise. Carol is a terrific physician scientist leader, and somebody that Lilly poached out of Denali, where she was the chief medical officer. I believe it was earlier this year. But anyway, it's good to see Lilly continuing their remarkable transformation, their continued buying spree in the industry, looking for innovation consistently in many different places. And, at a personal level, it's great to see Carol taking the lead on this acquisition here from Lilly. But Lilly is, I'm sure, going to be a frequent topic for this hangout.
Yeah. Sam, what do you think?
Yeah, so that Amazonification comment came partly from me, and I think the reason I use that is that they seem to be going in every possible area of pharma. Now, I'm pretty sure they're not in every single therapeutic category, but if you remember a couple of months ago, they did 3 deals almost back to back in infectious diseases, and then now here, this is their third CNS type disease that's outside of let's call it the neurodegeneration. And I think it speaks volumes to how they're thinking about the future, which will inevitably include some kind of plateau or pressure on their obesity franchise. Plateau if they continue to keep innovating and replacing, or pressure if someone else gets a meaningful position in here, and at some point there's some patent expiry or something that puts so, and I'm talking 10 years down the road here, right? So I think the more I see this, and John's comments were really fantastic on this, particularly his insight on who's in charge in the neuroscience part of Lilly. So that's the way I see Lilly going, and I think that probably is the only way to be managing such a massive future dilemma that will come. I don't know what else to call it, a potential risk that will come up. So over.
Yeah.
What I love is that they're just being so proactive about it. I mean, a lot of companies would say, we got 10 years of amazing growth in front of us, and we can, we can let it ride and take our time and sort of being urgent about it. But boy, they're just showing nothing less than incredible urgency around that future build and the future product opportunities that they need to have to be able to bridge the gap of just ginormous amounts of revenues. And that's smart. It's just so smart. And the proactivity is just remarkable. So kudos to that team for doing what they're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move over to biotech. BioCentury has actually had a very nice article yesterday reporting that 40% of NUCOs originating from China are now first in class, which is actually a departure from last year. I think this year there's been 14 or 15 NUCOs. I think it's more or less in line with last year, but of course, 4 of them are, I think it's like 4 out of the 14 or so. It's about 36 to 40% are now novel. Matt, maybe I know your team is constantly on the hunt for assets. What's changing in China?
Yeah, I mean, I'm on the record in a bunch of different settings as saying I think that China is a little bit of a smoke screen or a red herring for other dynamics that are changing pretty quickly on the technology side around the commodification of antibody development, around certain kinds of even small molecule chemistry, either with or without AI, getting easier and more reproducible, and about that stuff getting pushed to places that can do it cheaper, places that can do it faster. Obviously, China, the current leader there, although I think, to the question of like politically, what would happen if we closed off innovation from China, I think it would just happen somewhere else. But I think it's pretty remarkable the speed with which we can now move things. We collectively, globally, can move things from an idea to an experiment. And I think it's a great thing that there's more novel targets coming. More now, I don't not particularly biased toward the novel targets. More drugs of any kind coming through the pipeline, ready to be tried, and some of the best drugs we have are sixth generation on the same target, and some of the best drugs we have are the first of their kind. And I think they're all great. I do think we, like everybody else, look to China among many other places for new assets. And I'll say, if you compare the sort of surface area of where you find things now to 10 years ago, it is radically different in that, I think like whatever, there's been a lot less in licensing deals by US companies from Japan, for example, and obviously just like way, way, way more from China. The one thing that we still have going for us as an industry in the US is, what does everyone who invents a new drug anywhere in the world want for that drug? They want it to be studied in late stage trials in the US and approved for use here. And to be honest, a lot of that has to do with our high pricing for drugs. But nonetheless, it means that innovation around the world winds up benefiting us. And so I think it's a pretty exciting moment.
Yeah, I completely agree with Matt on this issue. As you guys probably know, I think for patients and for what our industry really focuses on, which is bringing medicines to patients. Having the sparks or the initial sparks of that innovation coming out of anywhere in the world is great, and ultimately we bring it here to this population and this market because it is the greatest place for reward of that innovation, and that's what attracts it all here at the end of the day. So the American patient does benefit enormously. I thought the BioCentury article was interesting. I mean, it wasn't. They called it the Asia to West Nucos, and it turns out that they include a couple of Japanese assets out of the 14 or 15 that they studied. So it wasn't only just China per se, but I do think that it probably reflects Matt's comments about just I'm forgetting the exact words you used, Matt, but the sort of the breadth of where things are coming from, and obviously more and more coming from China, which is an opportunity. And so anyway, something to watch in the big China debate, which of course is a bit of a polarizing topic for people, but one to continue to reflect on.
Is the data by and large completely reliable now from China? I mean, right, 5 to 10 years ago there was a sentiment that it's not reliable. I think now it's a lot more reliable, but we still hear from bigger companies that are very active in that area and are actively in licensing. So they're there and they're believers, but they're very much saying that not all data are created equal, not all data are trustworthy. Any thoughts about that?
I
And by,
think that's
and
true.
by the way,
I think that's
there
true.
was a big study recently, John. You might
Yeah.
know the study testing Keytruda, whether you gave Keytruda in the morning or whether you gave it at night,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Ended up
Yeah.
being then pulled,
Debunked.
debunked.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, look, I think there's still, I mean, there's still gaps in quality of data from different groups, and I think it is a bit of a wild west, and so you have to be super careful about understanding the quality of anything. That's true here too, but I think because of the volume, and sort of the speed aspect of things in China, which is a positive feature in some ways, but also a negative feature when people are cutting corners to try to get things done quickly. So it just, it's a you have to take all these things in balance, and buyer beware, or people should be diligent, need to be diligent to make sure that they're getting quality at the end of the day.
Well,
Matt, what do you
Understood.
think on that?
Look, I often think these sweeping statements about the data is good or bad from X place, or X people are good or bad at respecting IP or whatever, are mostly, you got to look at the person saying it, but I think they have other incentives behind them
Yeah.
in almost every instance.
Yeah.
But I do think like there will in life be trade-offs between regulatory speed and clinical trial speed and manufacturing speed and cost, and quality.
Yeah.
And hope, the thing you hope is that you can advance along that curve such that what was possible in 6 months at low quality before is now possible in 6 months at high quality, and whatever. But like those trade-offs are going to exist, and some of the very same things that make China faster are probably also things that would contribute towards, just like a little bit more variability. Just like,
Yeah.
if you run a big study, you're going to get less variability if you run a small study at some level. And so I think like, all that's going to obtain. But my personal view is, look, I think the proof's in the pudding. There's lots of great drugs invented in China, studied in China, that are now being studied in large studies here. And first of all, in many cases, the data has panned out. And second of all, it doesn't really matter because the phase 3 study is going to be the answer that goes on the label.
Yeah. You bet.
maybe let's tuck in. We have a regulatory and policy section later on, but I think this would be a good tuck in here. Maybe we could be brief about it, just given how much we got. There's a company out of China was advised by FDA not to file because the drug is manufactured in China. Any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I'll pitch onto that because that's what I heard, and obviously I can't tell you who the company was, but it was a very I double checked the fact, and that's exactly what it was. I don't know if how new this is. This is not about data. The data is being generated in the US. It's not even some of the patients are in the US. The US trial being conducted. So the question ends up being, why would manufactured product in China not be acceptable? Is this a completely new thing? Have you guys heard this before, or how does this fit with what you know and what you think?
Well, Sam, I wondered. I mean, I thought, I don't know any of the details here whatsoever, but I mean, it's not unusual that a given site in a given country or state or whatever, as a manufacturer, does not meet FDA standards, and that would lead to or could lead to an RTF if the FDA is aware of it in advance of a filing, or it could lead to a CRL. That happens all the time, right? So, but I don't know the specifics in this case.
Dozens of approved drugs in the US are manufactured in part in China. So it's certainly not the case that the current view of the US regulators is that drugs that are manufactured in China are not eligible for sale in the US.
Right.
Beyond that, I think it's just like really hard to interpret without more detail. And this could be as extreme as a strong political commentary by political appointees at HHS that could have drastic implications, or it could be that simply a specific manufacturing site wasn't up to snuff. And
Yeah.
for various reasons, people are choosing to describe that as an anti-China stance in order to achieve some objective.
So something to watch.
Yeah. But I agree with Matt. I don't think there's any reason to think there's a broader theme here, given just the larger numbers of drug products that are manufactured out of China.
Okay. All right, perfect. Matt, let me maybe put you here on the spot, and then John, I'd love for you to comment as well, just given your extensive experience kind of launching drugs. So Matt, your Roivant's is expected, and we're certainly expecting brepocitinib to get approved for dermatomyositis. For the audience, many of you know the drug. It's a JAK1/TYK2 oral inhibitors that showed very, very nice positive VALOR phase 3 data. Our consultants and all our work suggests this is going to be one of the best launches in the sector. The PDUFA's coming up. The guidance is to launch in September, so in the next 2.5 months. And we're modeling several billions. I think we've been consistently saying we think this is between $6 and $12 billion product because it's got 4 different indications now in pivotal testing. The next one, we're expecting non-infectious uveitis 2 phase 3 data by the end of this year, and which should be positive on the heels of the positive phase 2 data. So this is going to be probably the next big launch in biotech. What's interesting is about 20 to 40% of patients are taking JAK inhibitors off label. So there's physicians are already warehousing, physicians want to switch, and there's obviously a high met need because currently standard of care is IVIG, which is extremely inconvenient. So the question is, this is not the first drug that Roivant's going to launch, right? You've launched another drug in the past, but I think this is certainly going to be the biggest. One question is, how do you price? IVIG is one barometer, 225 grand. The next drug that's going to have data is Vyvgart. Vyvgart on a gross basis with weekly dosing is 870 before gross to net. So maybe how do you position Roivant to launch? How do you think about pricing with the first launch, first indication, and 3 more to come?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Yaron. Uh, we've said lots of times we're not going to give much in the way of like specific launch guidance because y'all are mean to companies that do. But look, I think you gave 2 bookends on pricing. I think we've basically said those are our bookends as well, and that will be somewhere in that range. Uh, Probably framed the way you just framed it, closer to the lower end of that range than the top end of that range, but that still leaves a pretty broad range. I think when we've talked about Vyvgart pricing in the past, it's been more of a sort of a $500,000-600,000 number, and I think we'll fall between those bookends. Look, I think it's a privilege to launch a drug with great data. It's a privilege to launch a drug that doctors care about and that we think patients will care about. Obviously, I made a comment earlier about how sometimes the best drugs available are, late in class or not the first in class. Obviously, JAK inhibitors have been around in different forms for different purposes for a while, and I think brepocitinib is a phenomenal example of a sort of current or next generation JAK inhibitor, and I'm really excited. It is the last drug we launched was a topical in psoriasis, and I think our experience there, among other things, convinced us that we want to launch a lot more drugs like brepocitinib. The other thing I'll say is we're coming at a moment where we get to watch or have gotten the privilege of watching a number of other companies, including Alnylam, launch drugs extremely successfully, especially in this kind of orphan zone. And so I think we're trying to soak that all up, learn every lesson that we possibly can, and stand on the shoulders of giants, so to speak.
Yeah, no, super interesting. And of course, that's as you think, even launching a drug these days in terms of getting formulary placement, um, getting on guidelines, how are things maybe different now? And John, chime in than they were 10 years ago.
I mean, I'm happy to speak, and then John can speak from
Yeah,
a
you start, Matt.
more
I'll
direct
come.
commercial. Look,
Yeah.
I think first of all, to all of the payers listening, I'll remind you, dermatomyositis is not a large patient population. This is not going to be a huge budget impact. Look, this is an orphan disease. This is a relatively small number of patients in the grand scheme of things. These are patients with high unmet need, high medical burden. And I think access, as with every one of these launches, what every company in our position says, and what I think the industry is largely delivering on at this moment in time, is every patient that needs this drug should have access to it. We are committed to that. And our job is to get drug to patients and then work with them to navigate the US healthcare system to get it paid for. And the honest answer is in these markets, in orphan and orphanish indications with high morbidity in general, that seems to work. That is, it's not, look, I think payers have a job to do, and that job is to make sure that these patients need drug. And I think, we have to work with them to make sure they're doing that job effectively. But in general, I think what the world will find is that these patients need this drug and they're going to be able to get access to it. So I think a lot of techniques have arisen in the past half decade to make this work. I think these are not generally, I mean, they're not sort of by definition, not highly competitive markets. It's not like there's 4 big pharma companies competing with rebates in this dermatomyositis space. And so I think these are generally not rebate intensive markets. And what you wind up doing is you have good bridge programs and great patient support people, and you work with the payers to get it done.
The one thing that I think we experienced it in launching many of our drugs, all of our drugs, was working very proactively with payers and even setting up pro value-based agreements at the beginning, and that turned out to be really positive in terms of reducing, what ordinarily could be headwinds. But as one of the reasons we were able to do that is we had outstanding data, like Matt does as well, which is really important. And then on top of it, we had a way that we could engage with the payer in a setting where the budget impact was not going to be enormous for them, right? And that helps as well. It's one of the benefits in the rare disease space in some ways. So I'm sure Matt and his team are doing those type of things, but those are changes in the system that are, I think, positive and do enable smaller companies to be very successful in doing launches, which is great.
All right, well, fantastic. All right, John, let's stay with you. Can you talk about Bio's response to the OMB proposal regarding to the political influence on federal grants and kind of what's the latest there?
Yeah, look, I was really happy to see Bio come out with a statement on the issue. I think we've all heard of the proposal to have political operatives make decisions around either continuing a grant funding or authorizing a new grant to be funded. And I think all of us have been hoping the industry associations would make some statement around this because nobody finds it as being good policy. Bio's response was a pretty sharp rebuke of the OMB proposal, stating amongst other things that it would destabilize the research ecosystem, that it would weaken merit-based funding decisions, that it would weaken U.S. competitiveness, undermine U.S. health security, among other concerns. And it's just great to see our industry association making comments in defense of our academic research enterprise, which again is the top of the funnel for biomedical innovation and so important, as well as the top of the funnel for training of our future scientists. And it is important that that gets done in a merit-based manner, like it has traditionally, and that political influence is not a part of that picture. It is also a reminder that we all need to be vocal on some of the administration policies for any administration, not just this one, but previous ones that can weaken innovation, and we must all be part of the process of making sure that we defend our industry and defend what's important for getting medicines to patients.
Okay. Um, well, let's go to next into a very juicy topic. And Sam, I'm gonna maybe call on you first. Kalshi has recently announced, literally in the last 2 days, that they're going to be opening a new venue to bet on clinical trials outcomes and regulatory approvals. They are going to put guardrails to make sure preclude any inside trading, preclude anybody with non-public information from participating. It's going to
Teleprompter people.
teleprompter people. It's going to be later stage clinical studies. It's going to be restricted to companies with market cap about 500 million. And this led to a lot of questions, both frankly supporting it, and also on the negative side. Some of the supporters said that this is a free market. Um, these are going to be a great way to play clinical studies and not play stocks. Maybe it's going to lead to less volatility in stocks. Some people even thought that potentially based on this, patients will be able to kind of look at what clinical studies are given a high chance of success. And, on a personal basis, might want to enroll in those studies and opposed to the other ones that are less likely to work. Of course, the drawback to all of this is then how do you enroll the other clinical studies if that becomes norm? Concerns about integrity of data, concerns about more volatility in the stock market, and obvious ethical issues and regulatory issues, et cetera. So, Sam, maybe with you, one of the companies that is a partner is Applied Excel, which obviously at Bloomberg you guys have had a relationship with. What's your thoughts about all of this?
Yeah. So just, Yaron, for disclosure, we do have a partnership with Applied Excel. They are an excellent team with whom we're doing some exciting stuff. So, all the things that you've just listed are all, I would say, fair. The criticisms and the positives, and I think it's something that this market needs to figure out as it happens. Because unless the regulators get in the way in terms of stopping it from happening, then I think it's going to be something that will become part of our lives. We have to see how big a driver it becomes. You know, that for it to become a way for for patients to decide which trials to go to. I mean, this is going to have to become a very major source of information flow with regards to the numbers of bets that are put on, if you want to call it that, or the number of positions that are taken for or against the trial, etc. And so I think that, you know, a lot of times I say to my team, and I think we all let's have those problems when they occur. I mean, of course, you have to be in front of them and be prepared for them. I think the company Kalshi has put quite a lot of restrictions on the types of people who can play in it. In the list that I saw, I don't think I saw patients particularly necessarily in there. But you know, I mean, what I'm looking forward to is being able to get some kind of prediction over time, statistical analysis of whether it's if they actually do predict the outcome of the trials, because that could be an interesting way of using probability of bringing another new probability of success into our calculations. So I'm sorry, I'm being very academic about it here. But in all I can tell you is that the group that we work with are sound and solid and very ethical. So how this pans out, I think time will tell. So I can't judge it more than that, to be honest. Over.
I agree with you, Sam. I think it. Look. I think there are concerns that should be discussed, and they are being discussed. And I think that's good that they're out there. It's interesting to me that they're selecting companies, larger companies, where you know, ordinarily one can't really generate you know, a bet. You know, if you wanted to look at this buying stock of Sanofi or Gilead, for example, which are two of the companies that are apparently have phase 3 trials that are being considered. You know, you can't you know, necessarily enjoy the benefits of a prediction. You know, based on, you know, just the size of those market caps and so forth, and this does allow you to sort of parse out the, you know, the specific trial that's being investigated for that purpose. So that does have an interesting, you know, flavor to how they're doing it. So we'll have to see, but I do tend to agree that it might be worth, instead of worrying about something and not allowing it to happen or permitting it, might be worth seeing how it goes first.
I mean, honestly, we do have much bigger problems potentially brewing with regards to AI and jobs and security and all that. So nobody seems to be putting a block in that, and we're worried about one thing here. Of course, that's our job, right? But let's see how it pans out. I might give you a new
What
probability of success measure, Yaron.
one fun thing is you can bet on the approval of brepocitinib on Kalshi now. It's one of the contracts. So there's about
Oh, is it?
$3,000. Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
according
Wow.
to Kalshi, we have an 81% chance of getting approved by the end of this year. So
Oh, well, that's
Uh,
good, right? I like the 1% in there.
There's about the bid offer is yeah, it's 81 at 26 is I think yes. It looks like 81 at 74 is like really where the order book is, and it looks like there's about $3,000 staked on each side. We had a brief debate inside the company yesterday about whether our insider trading policy forbade employees from participating in this market. So you know,
What did you
I think
decide?
they forbid it.
we
Somehow.
haven't like issued a formal decree yet, but I would not be that happy to find out that my employees were spending a
I
lot of
agree.
time trading
I agree.
on Kalshi is the honest answer to that question. Although I have no
Right.
inside, the truth is I have no inside information as to whether brepocitinib will be approved, and really it's the FDA that should be making these rules. It's a to me it's mostly an entertaining curiosity. I will say this to Sam's comment about probabilities of success. My prediction is it is a long time before anyone does a proper statistical analysis of whether this is a good or bad predictor. And frankly, it would take a lot of whatever
Data.
the thing you're betting on is. It would take a lot of N to actually
Yeah.
answer that question. So I'm not that optimistic that we're going to know for a while as to whether this is a
Well,
good tool or a bad tool from that perspective.
but Matt, I intend to be doing analysis still for another 20 years. Hopefully, we can get some answer by then.
Uh, in 20 years, it's going to be all like Claude betting against Anthropic on the, or Claude betting against OpenAI on these things, right? We're not even going to have to do it. We're just going to watch the robots talk to each other about it.
That's a scary, scary thought.
They're going to write the
no,
analysis reports too. So
exactly. Yeah, we're still waiting for that to happen. The look, I think conceptually, this is absolutely a need. So why not have this tool? It's just a question. I'm more concerned on the regulatory side, to be honest. This would not be good if you're having physicians, betting on this, or nurses, even in big open label studies, or even in the regulatory element is, I think, is the stickler for me. Okay, let's move to another one. Exciting news. John, I'm gonna maybe call you on this one.
Yeah.
This is so close to your heart. Merck's Lipfendra, it's the oral PCSK9 drug, was just approved. It's the first one. That one does have good data, almost kind of antibody-like PCSK9 reduction.
Yeah.
I might butcher this one, but this one does have the food effect, and AstraZeneca, I believe, does not, coming right behind it. Um,
Yeah.
Thoughts about, is this going to be a revolutionary drug? They have great data, but they don't have outcomes yet. Are outcomes important, or at this point we know that the lower the better on LDL? That's no longer questionable. And do you really need outcomes? And then I'd love to, if you can comment about the exciting work that Coursera is doing too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I think it's fantastic. It's great to see this approval. PCSK9 was one of the poster child undruggable targets for a long time, and Merck succeeded, and AZ is following with a macrocyclic peptide that binds to PCSK9 and inhibits interaction with the LDL receptors. So it's really an exciting piece of science for starters. And it is gonna enter a market with PCSK9 inhibitors that is now multi-billion-dollar market with Amgen and Repatha in the lead on that side of it. Second in the mix is Novartis and Alnylam's drug Leqvio, which was fun to bring to market along with the medicines company. I think it's going to be wonderful to have another option for patients out there. It's interestingly priced under the price of the antibodies, so $3,800 per year, compared to roughly five to $6,000 per year for the antibodies and the sRNA products that are currently on the market. And now, of course, with all the rebatology, I don't really know what that means at a net basis. But it's interesting that's where they landed on the pricing. And it's also interesting that this was a drug approved under Marty's CMPV program, that he brought forward. So I'm excited to see how it launches. I'm going to predict that it will do well, but let's see if Kalshi agrees with my prediction ultimately. On a personal note, it's obviously an area of interest because we're developing at Coursera, one of the companies I'm building, a PCSK9 and angiotensinogen siRNA given once a year for prevention, which is a different market than different population than where this drug is approved. I still think that in the setting of prevention, especially primordial prevention, that lowering the disutility of these type of therapies with a once a year administration compared to a daily pill is going to be important because the adherence issues are really prominent and problematic, with statin-based drugs. So anyway, it'll be great to see it and follow it. I'm really excited to see it come to market.
So, John, quick question for you. The question with Coursera is path to market. And I know
Mhm.
this is something that you're and Clive obviously very much pioneering with the team. Any updates there? And I'm not sure if that's suitable for here.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I mean, I can tell you what we tell everybody, which is we expect to run two studies for approval, one biomarker based and the other outcomes based. And so there will be an outcome study. There'll need to be. I don't think the outcomes data will be an impediment for Lefendra's. initial launch. Obviously, it'll be supportive when the data mature enough to be made available. The same will apply with what we're doing. So now our outcome study will have to be much larger because of the fact that it is a primordial population with the event rate being lower. But there are ways of enriching populations to make that more tractable and doing clinical studies with reduced cost, which is what we aim to do.
Yeah. At what point are outcome studies not going to be required? I mean, we know, right? The lower the better. Even a 20 mg per
Right.
deciliter confers. This is back to when babies are born, right?
Yeah.
Confers
Yeah.
benefits.
Well, they're not required. They're not required for approval. I mean, they've not been required for approval for a while, which is good.
Mhm.
I think everybody believes that they are helpful in supporting the business case, right? So and I think that's why they continue to get done at some level. Especially in unique populations. I mean, our population has not actually really been studied. Because we're talking primordial prevention, which is much earlier in people that are predicted to have a high lifetime risk of developing ASCVD and heart attacks and strokes. So it's a bit of a unique population. But we do think approval can still be done with biomarkers at the end.
Yeah. And so the natural question is, do you have a sort of a target LDL level? Because you can go, it depending on the risk patient and obviously based on characteristic family history, do you go to 70? Do you go to 40? Do you just go below
Well,
100? Yeah.
yeah, I mean, again, we're gonna target primordial prevention, so it doesn't even have to be, over the guideline limits of what currently is indicated for treatment of hypercholesterolemia, and also in a younger population. But that's based on the belief that we can predict lifetime risk using an AI-enabled tool, right? So that's the key. That's the key of what we're doing in our approach at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Terrific.
Just one last thing to add here, that Astra's ambitions is to do a combination with their oral obesity drug.
Mhm.
That's what they've talked about. Whether that's a fixed dose combination or not, I don't know, but that's one of their ambitions. Over.
And what's your thoughts about that? I mean, there's so much going on these days in longevity, and then people
I mean,
are.
I don't know if you need that. If John's successful with an annual drug, which is priced more achievably, then why do you need that, right?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay, let's John, let's stay and we do want to talk about M&A, but I think we also have a data section to talk about. Biogen, along with Ionis, just unveiled 2 days ago their phase 2 diranersen. This was injectable tau that goes intrathecally. It's an ASO
Mhm.
targeting tau. This was a randomized study, 3 different arms, placebo against a low dose versus high dose, dosing either every 12 weeks or every 24 weeks for the audience with the ASO. Primary endpoint was at 76 weeks. They were looking at statistical significance of the higher dose versus placebo. They didn't compare the low dose versus placebo on ADAS-Cog, essentially CDR sum of boxes for Alzheimer's. And technically, the study failed because the primary endpoint was the high dose, did not do as well against placebo. The lower dose, by the way, in the 76-week study looked better, which is actually consistent with the phase 1b data. And based on all of that, which was reduction in phosphorylated tau, reduction in tau imaging, there was also a slowdown of deterioration of ADAS-Cog and also CDR sum of boxes, 0.54 points, which is considered clinically meaningful by FDA. The bogey was 0.5. So based on that, Biogen's going to go into phase 3. But this is fairly controversial. Biogen stock was down. From an Ionis perspective, people were looking at that and thinking it's intrathecal. Arrowhead is siRNA that's IV or sub-Q.
Yep.
That's going to be easier and that's behind. So maybe thoughts about this data and on the overall technology.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think obviously it's a bit of a confusing data set. I'm overall net encouraged by this as it relates to tau as a target in Alzheimer's, and I think we all have to be mindful that this is a super tough disease. But the Wall Street reaction was mixed, and part of it was the inverted dose response, and also the view that the level of efficacy that was achieved was really no better than current anti-amyloid drugs like Leqembi and Kisunla. So I think that's the real nature, the real crux of the response. I think what has got to be considered here is that the nature of this inverted dose response is due once again to the poor tolerability that one sees with ASOs versus other technologies, and that's why Arrowhead with what they're doing, and also Alnylam has a program targeting tau, which is intrathecal. Arrowhead's program is a trans BBB shuttle. Those programs, I'm excited to see where those go. But the ASO story in the CNS, of course, has been complicated. And just to that point, last week, we saw Roche terminating their tominersen and another ASO program in Huntington's. And we also notably saw the eplontersen fail in CardioTransform last week, which, again, a reminder, ASOs have tolerability issues, and they could be contributing to mixed interpretations of overall results. So I'm net encouraged by this as it relates to tau. I think a lot of the complexity around the results could be mostly tolerability and ASO related, just like we've seen time and time again. So we'll see how it plays out longer term with other approaches that target tau. But I don't think we should damn the target just because of the ASO.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, the higher dose did have more AEs and lower dose
Yes.
density than the lower dose.
Yes, exactly.
Can I just ask quickly there, in terms of these are not targeting an offending form of tau necessarily. They're targeting tau production, right? So what do you think is the risk that if you're actually reducing, I mean, the protein has a function in general. So you're not. So what do you think about the fact that you're reducing tau levels? And is there a balance, do you think, between the two? Because that was one of the conversations that I heard being played out.
Mhm.
What do you think?
Well, I mean, I think that's always, so the off target or the on target rather pharmacology being, with at higher doses being problematic. I don't know if there's enough support for that based on the biomarker data that have been published from the study, which wouldn't support that.
That's true. That's true. Because actually, when you look at that tau level dose response, I mean,
Yeah.
unfortunately, I'm not looking at that chart with the reductions in tau saying, oh, look, there's a dose response here that the high dose isn't reducing tau as much as low dose. It's
Yeah.
all those error bars were overlapping, etc. So, but there is a point here in that this is a difficult subject, and Biogen pays the price for trying something at the at the edge of our understanding of biology here. And I find that a bit tough to swallow a little bit. I'm not supporting, I'm not saying the share price reaction was wrong or not, but somebody has to do this and figure it out as the time passes. So
Absolutely. And have the courage to do it as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, look, I have a mother that's got Alzheimer's, so I've been following this very closely, and I obviously follow Ionis. The challenge with the antibodies is they're always, putting a little bit of a cork into a huge kind of fire hydrant. They were too late, so you need to go early. So we're always very interested in the modality of actually going and preventing the propagation. Some of the challenges, again, having a family member and you got to decide, do you treat someone or not? The complexity of the therapy. The issue with ARIA, with the antibodies, is monitoring is extremely difficult. Even if you live in New York City and you have good access to care. And the benefits were modest, and the benefits are maybe a little bit better here, but it really is preventing deterioration with a very little CDR sum of boxes cognitive benefit, and it's always the challenge,
But the lack of ARIA signal so far is encouraging, Yaron.
Big deal. Absolutely.
It's a big deal because the big challenge with the amyloid antibodies, of course, is that risk that factors into it, and if there's only potential Not that any drug is without its tox and tolerability issues, but if there's only potential upside, then it changes the equation a little bit, doesn't it?
Yeah, and you have to remember when you have this disorder, a lot of times you don't want to be reminded of it over and over again.
Yeah.
And going in to get monitored over and over again is not exactly easy in terms of even convincing the patient themselves to do this.
Yeah.
Okay, Sam, we have I think about 2.5 minutes left, and we have 3 topics. So I think we're going to cut it down to 2 on M&A. Let's start with I think the more interesting one, the AstraZeneca D-cell deal for EGFR exon 20. AstraZeneca is marketing Tagrisso, the EGFR inhibitor. They're the 800-pound gorilla. Sales are over 7 billion or so. And so they're now licensing another one and exon 20 this has been a well-known class, kind of mixed results in many ways. What do you think of this deal?
Yeah, so I mean, look, remember, Astra has an investment in T-cell actually. So, but what was interesting is that we were wondering why it took them so long. $600 million up front, up to $900 million development milestones, etc. I mean, the data that we've been looking at all along, we think that as an inhibitor, sunvozertinib, which is the drug that's not approved anywhere outside of China, does stack up. I'm looking at our charts, looking at it compared to Cullinan, to Arivant's data, to Hansoh's data, and also, of course, you've got Rybrevant out there, which is Johnson & Johnson's EGFR MET bispecific inhibitor. So the data stacks up, and the side effect profile looks easier to manage. And I think Astra is the ideal partner here to be selling this, given that they have the broader EGFR space. Now, this is a small indication, but it's one that needs the drug. So we're positive on the diesel product, and we'll see. It's marketed in China and it's doing relatively well. Over.
Okay, and maybe in the last 30 seconds, Erasca had data relating to RAS, and then they did a $500 million raise. Thoughts about the data?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of people who are skeptical about Erasca and in terms of where the drug came from. And I think Revolution Medicine helps fan that conversation. There are some legal discussions. I don't think they've actually taken them to court yet, but about whether the drug infringes Revolution's IP. But I mean, the 500 million raise, which was upsized to about 600 something, and which is quite a tick in the box in a market that was looking a bit dodgy in the past week, as we just talked about at the beginning of the conversation. So, to me, that sounds like a sign of somebody believes in this. With the data improved relative to with an addition of 4 more patients and a month more of follow-up, which is always a nice thing to see because we're used to the opposite most of the time, where the data deteriorates. And the ORR is beginning to get very meaningfully in the range that you see from Revolution, and also side effect profile looks a bit better, which does make me wonder sometimes with regards to drugs which show a lower AE thing, and you think, well, how do you manage that? Which of course they have explanations for. So looks decent for now, and we have a whole bunch more catalysts coming in the next few months. So it's going to be fun watching this in pancreatic cancer.
Yeah, well, terrific. Well, amazing. Thank you, John, Matt, and Sam, for a very insightful episode. To everybody, if you're watching the games, hope you enjoy them. And please join all of us at Hangout again next week, same place, same time.